Welcome to the Lair of Secrets podcast. Yes, that is correct. We actually have a name now. This is the podcast about gaming and being a geek by two 40-something geek dads. I'm Ken Newquist, an IT project manager, comic book enthusiast, an outdoor guy who is actually getting out into the outdoors a lot more these days.
And I am David. I'm a father, coder, gamer, woodworker, and guy with too many hobbies he likes to pursue.
And we do like to talk about our hobbies.
A lot. That's why this show is here.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is technically episode 4 that you guys will hear. We have a couple, as we said before in a previous podcast, there are some unaired podcasts. But we haven't actually recorded in a couple of weeks, thanks to Ken's vacation. But you won't notice that because we're putting several in the can before we release them. So
just like they skipped forward in time, they got to skip over those couple of weeks to arrive. Now is now, right?
Yes. Yes, that is the nice thing about podcasting is it syncs to whatever time you were on.
Unfortunately, I'm still stuck in time from a couple of weeks ago. So as we talked about in a previous podcast, I'm currently doing a 10K training program, and I got to week 4 of the training program, and a couple things happened. So first of all, I blew out a sneaker for the second time.
How do you blow out a sneaker?
Well, I guess that's maybe overly dramatic. I ripped the sneaker down the side.
Ouch. Okay. Okay.
Where the fabric joins with the sole of the sneaker, I ripped that.
Yeah.
And so I use Hoka running sneakers. Some of the backstory that I've alluded to before, several years ago, I broke my ankle, recovered from breaking my ankle. Now I have to run with soles that are probably about 2 inches thick because it's nice extra padding. Goes easy on my ankle. So I have these great shoes, great running sneakers. And so I bought a pair when I started running again, and I use them quite a lot. I ran a couple 100 miles probably with them. And then I'm still new to running. And so it did not occur to me that that sneakers have a lifespan, right? You run, apparently, people have now told me, you run for 400 to 600 miles and you should get a new pair of sneakers. Like, okay, because my previous pair had ripped after that amount of time, that amount of mileage, basically. And so I got a new pair of sneakers back in February. And then in July, I did the same sort of rip on my sneaker. So I don't blame the sneaker. I blame me, because I think after the second time it happened, I'm like, it's happened again. And I'm like, what? How? I must be doing something here. And so I think that if my kids had been doing this, I would have been all over them. But I was doing it, so I didn't realize I was doing it. I was just popping my sneakers off when I came home from running. I wasn't unlacing them.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think what was happening is over time, I mean, these are running shoes, not tear off your feet shoes, right? And so they're not breakaway sneakers, or at least they shouldn't be.
Right.
So I think what was happening is that I was just like coming home, collapsing, and like slipping off the sneakers, but not really slipping off the sneakers because they were still tied.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that probably is what did it. So Hoka does offer a warranty for like a 1-year warranty. So I'm thinking this is on me, but I'm documenting it this time. So I'm very conscientiously making sure that I am taking my sneakers off correctly.
Got it.
So lessons learned.
Yeah. Although you were saying, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but like I'm walking more. You're saying running shoes wear out after 300 or 400 miles, which is just inconceivable to me. And it's probably not very long, but it sounds like it would take years to get to that point. And I wear out my sneakers well before several years. So I don't know. 300 or 400 miles sounds like a heck of a lot to run.
It is. And I think, although it adds up over time. So I was running, when I was training for doing a 10K, I was training for doing the 5K after recovering from breaking my ankle. That was like 6 miles a week for 8 weeks. It adds up, and then just continuing running after that. And now doing the 10K, now I'm up to more like 5 to 6 miles a session, 3 times a week. So it
adds up fast.
It adds up pretty quickly, right? Yeah. So that was one of my things, and that happened just before I went on vacation. And then also I think the thing that I learned when I was doing the 5K training, and I think this is applicable to any time you're doing exercise, is like your body is going to give you signs that maybe you're trying too hard. And you need to listen to your body, because, especially, if I may say, at our age, because otherwise you're going to hurt yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to this point both in the 5K where I feel like, you know what, I'm not feeling it. I'm going to hurt myself if I keep going. I should pause and then like repeat week 4. And so that's where I'm at right now is I'm doing a little bit of Groundhog's Day. I took a break. I started until I was getting to like 5 to 6 miles and feeling pretty good. And then different things started to hurt. I'm like, okay, something's off here. So I've taken a step back. I'm working on my form and kind of like got the new sneakers, breaking them in and kind of easing back in. So
yeah, at our age, our bodies tend to complain more loudly than they do in our, teens, 20s, and even early 30s.
I mean, I like to joke that it's all original. It was all original equipment before I broke my ankle, but like, because I never used it, because I never did any exercise until I hit my 40s.
Right.
So yeah, so that's one of the things. And I'm also looking to get into cycling.
Cool.
I bought last year. My bike almost literally disintegrated underneath me while on a bike ride. I mean, it was a death trap on wheels. And so I got a new bike last year, and I was using that to commute to work. I have it's not like it's a super long commute. It's like a mile and a half downtown. And so I was riding a fair amount each week, but really just kind of getting to and from my day job. And then obviously in the COVID-19 world, I'm working from home. So that's no longer a challenge or no longer a thing I can do. So now I'm looking at using cycling as a way of kind of complementing running, because there's only so much running you can do in a week.
Right.
And cycling is more kinder and gentler to my ankle.
I like Bycling. I like Bycling.
Sorry?
I like the word Bycling.
Yeah,
Bycling.
That's the advanced version.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a few things to learn, because one of the things is cycling shoes. Apparently this is a thing. Like I have cycled in my life, and I've cycled quite a lot sometimes. Like, when I was younger, that was really the sport that I enjoyed. Sport exercise that I enjoyed. It never was actually competitive or anything. But it never really occurred to me that, there are actually cycling shoes and they can improve your ride. So that's a thing I'm researching right now.
Now, I know a little bit about cycling shoes just from some friends of mine who did cycle. They never got into it professionally, but they were really into cycling. I'm not sure why they didn't compete. They had like cycling shoes and special pedals that their shoes would clip into. I don't know if that's the type of cycling shoe you're talking about.
That's what I've been thinking about. Like, I've been talking with friends who cycle and have more experience in this than I do. And same thing with running, right? Like, I talk to people who actually know what they're doing instead of trying to figure it out all on my own. And so, yeah, I'm looking at like maybe graduating to clip-in shoes. So there's shoes you can get that basically a cycling shoe has a flatter, firmer bottom. I guess.
Okay.
It's a firmer, more solid bottom. So you can apply pressure evenly. And then when you clip in,
it
allows you,
from what I understand.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And so, I mean, honestly, just as it's like I don't know, this is kind of like a paranoid concern, I suppose. My biggest concern with the clip-ins is figuring out how to clip out.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was concerned about when I was hearing about that as well. It's like, what happens if you fall over? But evidently it's just like a quick twist and it pops out. So it's
I'm not the world's most coordinated person.
Yeah, it's not supposed to hold. It's not like when I first heard about it, I thought about like downhill or cross country skiing, where your boots were effectively attached to the skis, and there is a quick release, but not like as you're crashing quick release.
Right.
Whereas the cycling, it sounds like that was taken into account, because you don't want to be still attached to your bike as it's falling over.
Yes, exactly. So that's the thing I'm researching. I'm continuing to work on my summer reading list. So I knocked out a bunch of books while I was on vacation, which was very satisfying and exceedingly relaxing. I recommend it for anyone. And so I'm currently working on David Brin's The Ancient Ones, which is his first comedy science fiction novel. He's best known, I think, for his Uplift trilogy, Startide Rising.
Yeah, not comedy. Is what I heard.
And he's like, he's got an interest in political science, and he writes a lot of kind of thought pieces and what have you. And so David Brin and humor are not two things that I would have thought. Not that David Brin can't be a funny guy. It's just
right. It's just
reading it with work.
Yeah, I would not have expected you to say this is his comedy science fiction novel. Those words and David Brin did not, in my mind, ever cross.
Right. So the novel is riffing on Star Trek. And so the ancient ones in the book are actually us, humanity, and we are kind of the elder species that is kind of taking on like the Vulcan role to this young upstart species that is, they got starships and they're just barging all over the galaxy. So it's a little bit of role reversal from your traditional, humans are always the new kids on the block, right?
Right.
So it's a short novel. I think I don't know how many words it is, but just judging from what it looks like on my Kindle, it looks closer to novella length than it is like full on like epic science fiction novel length. So I think I'm going to knock out that one pretty quickly. And then I'm not sure we're going to read next. I might read Extension, which I believe I talked about earlier by, and I can never pronounce his first name correctly, but Ian Banks. Ian Banks? You still pronounce it Ian?
I'm not sure.
It's one of those things you never actually say aloud.
Yeah.
And as previous established, I'm terrible at pronouncing things. But in any case, he has these great series of novels that are set in the culture, which is about this post-scarcity science fiction galactic commonwealth, basically. And they've solved all of the social problems. And it's about their interactions with the larger galaxy, whom don't always look kindly on the culture coming in and trying to solve their problems for them, or the engagement with the culture. So that's one book, and it's part of a longer series. And then the other one I'm looking at, and I'm super excited to read it because it's the latest book in the Salvagers series by Alex White. It's called The Worst of All Possible Worlds. And this book surprised me a couple years ago when I read the first one because it's a mashup of space opera and magic. So you've got people with, they're casting spells to raise shields around their starfighters.
I've heard of Alex White before. Is it Angry Robot Books? No, not Angry Robot. What do you know what the publisher is? Happen to know what the publisher is?
I do not, but I'm sure Google could tell us.
Yeah.
This is the first of his books that I've actually read. And so I have to say, I had this moment when I was reading the first one when I thought, what the heck have I gotten myself into? Because I was expecting space opera, and now I've got something else entirely. It's by Orbit Books.
Okay, so let's see. I thought he had written some books that I had read years ago, but it's not the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, based on his bibliography, he had written Every Mountain Made Low, published by Solaris in 2016, and Alien: The Cold Forge, which is an Alien franchise tie-in published by Titan in 2018. The first book in the series that I alluded to earlier is A Big Ship at the End of the Universe, published by Orbit.
Okay, no, he did write stuff, but it's not listed there. I did find it on Goodreads. He did the Gearheart.
Wikipedia was wrong?
Wikipedia is incomplete. He did the Gearheart, which was also a podcast, and that's where I know it from. And that was a ways back.
Gotcha. So they're very enjoyable books. I definitely recommend them. To me, it's kind of like, this is like the chocolate sundae with cherries on top of my summer reading list. I've been looking forward to this one all summer, and I kept thinking I was going to read this one next, and the thing didn't drop at the end of July.
Oh,
so,
no.
I was coming up with my list of books to read on vacation. I'm like, oh, well, obviously I'm going to read The Worst of All Possible Worlds. Oh, no, it's not coming out until the end of July. So.
Yep.
So I think this may be, and not to in any way imply that the culture novels are the spinach on my reading list, but they are meaty books. Like they're good, thoughtful books that they're work to get through, but they're a good kind of work.
Cool.
And The Worst of All Possible Worlds is just, I'm going to take this to the beach, or I'm going to take this on a camp out or something and read.
Right. Right.
So other things that happened over the last couple of weeks. So I got Mythic Odysseys of Theros.
Oh, cool.
This is the latest source book for Dungeons and Dragons, published by Wizards of the Coast.
Okay.
5th edition. It's for the Theros world from Magic the Gathering. It is inspired by Greek mythology, and that just kind of hits a lot of... I'm not all that up on Magic the Gathering. I've played, but I don't know a lot about the actual world. But just reading some of the previews on Twitter, it started wanting me to scratch this, giving me an itch to scratch that I didn't know I have, which was to run like a Clash of the Titans style game.
Cool. Very cool.
Right. And draw kind of because it's all about, they actually have rules in here for how the gods interact with the world. And there's like a piety stat where the higher your piety is, the greater boons you get from your god. So it's very much meant to be kind of like a Zeus comes down and says, hey, do this thing for me. Or Zeus comes down and says, you pissed me off.
Yeah. Actually, there's another game that you might be interested in as well. It is by the same publisher and game designer of the game that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But the game is Hellas, Adventures in the Wine Dark Void. And that game is set, like, imagine the Aegean Sea with, the Spartans and Troy, et cetera, and all the gods, but blown up on a galactic scale.
Oh, nice.
And so instead of sailing ships across the ocean, you sail ships and you sink down into this subspace sort of area as you go deeper, out into the ocean, basically. But that's how you get to places faster. As you're not in normal space, you sink into this subspace. The deeper you go, the more toward the underworld you get.
Right.
It's very much a 300 sort of esque. The battles of Troy and Iliad and the Odyssey, those sorts of stories are meant to be told there. If you play a campaign, you're not meant to, the character you start with is not going to be the character you end with. But there will be a through line from your first character to the end character. So if your first character dies, maybe your son comes out to take up arms and continue your legacy. Or if you fall on the battlefield and you have no heirs, your spearman picks up your spear and continues the battles and such. And so there's basically a through line all the way through, and you get some of the glory from the previous character for your next character. And the more glory you have, the more of those sorts of, calling upon the deities or the fates or anything like that you can do for special abilities or special powers.
Wow, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I definitely want to look at that one. And so the last thing I have, it hasn't actually arrived yet. I ordered Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. And so this is either it is both an expansion to Gloomhaven, which is, as I understand it, like one of the most complicated board games ever made.
It is huge.
And it's also a standalone. Right.
Yes.
And so this is meant to be an easier, faster, some might say kinder, gentler version of the base game. Instead of having all kinds of tiles you have to assemble, there's a flip book where you just open up to the next scenario and then you use the flip book as the map. So I got it because my son's been itching to play Dungeons and Dragons. We got in some of that over vacation, which was really nice.
Cool.
But I thought, given the ongoing state of the world and us just not getting out and being able to game as much as we would like, I thought this might be a cool, late fall, winter, we're trapped inside on a Saturday. Let's break out the Jaws of the Lion and play it. So we'll see. And if we like it, we can get Gloomhaven.
Yeah, let me know, because I've heard it called Gloomhaven Light, but in a good way. Like there's Gloomhaven, like you were saying, they've got a lot of tiles and such. There's a lot of setup if you want to play all the aspects and all the layers of Gloomhaven. And it seems like they learned from all of that and boiled it down. So it's like, we know there are people out there that don't want to spend an hour just setting up the game and don't have a $2,000 specialized gaming table so that they can just put a cover on top of it so they don't have to break it down between sessions. So, you flip open the book and there's your map, and you put everything on it. And from what I understand, it plays pretty much the same, but and it can be pretty complex in certain spots. There's a lot of layers still, but they've distilled all that from the Gloomhaven and made improvements from what I understand, which sounds really cool. And they still have some of the cool stuff like opening boxes and stuff like that.
Yes.
Of like, don't open this until you are told to, and be surprised, which is always pretty cool.
Right. As we discussed previously, I have Pandemic Legacy, but that seems like it's a little bit too much on the nose right now. So this would be my substitute for Pandemic Legacy. Because, maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I opened the box and I shouldn't have opened the box.
Yep.
But you don't know. So what have you been up to?
So I'm going to go in kind of the similar order that you did. I've been exercising. Last couple of days, it's been really hot and humid, so I have not been walking as much as I had been, but still have been attempting to do at least twice a day. I've been feeling better doing it. It's been too hot for me to really start the run side of things, but as the temperatures cool off, I'm going to try and start that, and then hopefully not stop, get my treadmill fixed and not stop over the winter. And maybe I'll be able to catch up with you and do maybe a 5K by the end of the year.
I think that's it's very familiar. I mean, I went for a run today, and I was hoping to go for 3 miles, and I made it for 2 because I feel like I ran into like this wall of humidity and heat. And I don't think our climate's that much different from yours right now. It was the thermometer said it was in the high 80s, but it felt like it was in like the hundreds, just like swimming through humidity. So
yeah, that's exactly how it feels here.
I feel your sweat.
Yeah. I didn't do any walking yet today. Afterward, I probably will. But I was out in the garage workshop cleaning and making a bunch of shop furniture. Took an old furnace blower fan and motor and wired it up to a cord. And so I have it now in one of the new drill press stand. And so now I can turn it on and actually get airflow in the garage. So
always important.
Yes. So that'll be nice. Going on from that to my reading list, much shorter than yours, unfortunately, actually, but I'm going to add some more on there. I finished Peace Talks. It released July 14th, and I think I was done with it July 15th, maybe 16th. It was good. It felt really short to me, but then again, some Dresden Files novels just go really fast and do feel really short, but it felt a lot more because there's another Dresden Files novel dropping before the end of this year.
Oh wow.
And so it feels like Peace Talk feels a lot like it's the setup for the next book. And there is a constant storyline through all of these novels so far, and there's a lot, but it didn't feel like filler, but it felt like here's all the stuff that we needed to set up in order for the next novel to actually accomplish. It didn't feel like there was a lot of character growth, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha.
Just kind of like catching up everybody. It's like, hey, there was like a 2+ year hiatus between novels, and let's catch everybody up, even though you might have read all of them. It was still good, and I'm really looking forward to the next one later this year. And I had paused reading The Color of Magic, which is the first Discworld novel by Terry Pratchett. I'm still reading it. I'm about 70% of the way through, if the Kindle's correct. It's definitely his first novel. Even he said, don't start with Color of Magic first. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, it's still good, but he gets better. And so here I am, after having read probably 8 Discworld novels, and then jumping back to the very first one and going, oh, yeah, I see why he says don't read this one first. You have to kind of love it to really work your way through it. But it's still good. It is still good. It is definitely a Discworld novel.
Yeah, I did the opposite. That was the book I started with, and that is the only one I've read, probably for the reasons you just gave.
Okay.
And I know I should go back, and I know Terry Pratchett is good, and we talked about him before. And so I really just need to do the thing where you pick, because there's so many of them, right? And there's any number of different suggestions for where to start. It's just don't start here. If I had asked anyone, he would have said, don't start here.
Your friend and mine, Dr. John Schmar, he pointed out that, hey, there's this start with probably the Guards series. And he also pointed me to a really good suggested reading order where you can kind of pick and choose where you want to do, but it also shows you which plot lines and which characters are in each book. It's writing about a world. So there's a lot of different areas. I'd suggest go to library and pick up Guards. That's where I started, and I just fell in love with it. And it was really quite good. I would try Discworld again and go with Guards as your next read. If you're interested in fantasy comedy.
Yeah, I think once I get into, comedy in fiction form can be such hit or miss. And I think part of that is, I read The Hitchhiker's Guide first, and it's set such a high standard for humor, I think. And the wordplay in there is fantastic, and all the different iterations of Hitchhikers have been really fun. And so I haven't found that many novels that actually still hit that same, that are quite as good. And so it kind of turns me off when I don't read one that's quite as funny, which is part of the challenge with the David Brin book.
Yes.
Although it is amusing. It is definitely amusing. I don't know that it's funny.
Got it. On to gaming. Unfortunately, I'm now going on no regular Sunday game for 6 weeks in a row now. It keeps falling through for one reason or another. A lot of reason being it's summer and people don't want to be stuck inside on a Sunday. It seems like we get about a third of the group in size, and that's just not quite enough to even play. The group that had started the Gamma World Hex Crawl was only 2 and then 3 people, but it's 2 of those 3 people are the ones that are not able to show up. So it's one of those things where we just haven't been able to play. So hopefully this next weekend, we'll cross my fingers. And I think we're going to be back to 5th edition D&D. So with our other GM. So, and that's like the whole group, including families and stuff like that. So I did manage to play on the Saturday before a game of Atlantis, the Second Age, again by the same people who I was talking about who made Hellas. It's by Capera Publishing, and Jerry Grayson is the primary designer on it. It's Jerry describes it as basically on the site. There's a picture of a Michael Moorcock, Elric of Melnibone book, and then plus Conan of Samaria book, plus a D20 is Atlantis, the Second Age. And it was a lot of fun. We had a really good small group. You can even see the characters in the download section on the Atlantis site. You can even see the characters we played. I played a character called Rygar, who was like a beast man, who was part lion. We had a djinn, and then we had a human. It was an amazing adventure. It was a lot of fun. None of us had really, I knew Jerry, and everybody knew Jerry, but none of the players knew each other. It was one of those groups that just gelled, and it felt like a really good convention game.
You gotta love those.
Yeah. And it was short. It was about 2 hours, I think. And it felt like we got a lot of done. Yes. Yeah. Atlantis is its own hardcover book. It's a pretty decent size. It's set in Atlantis. It very much has a feel of like the Conan sort of ancient world. One of the things it says is it's based on the classic Atlantean trilogy by Bard Games, which I'm not familiar with. It is a very sword and sorcery game that's like Fritz Leiber, Michael Moorcock, Robert E. Howard, Clark Aston Smith, and it was a lot of fun. And the game system is very straightforward and quick to play. Basically, you have the stats and you have skills, and you add those things together usually, and you roll a d20, and you're going to subtract your enemy's defense from it. And then if you're like 11 or above, that's a full success that you hit. If it's 20 or above, then that's a critical. If it's 10 or less, that's a partial success. And I think if it's under 7, that's a failure. If it's 1 or less than 1, like if you're not good at all, it's a critical failure. So basically, you're just rolling 1d20 and no other dice. You just have 1d20 and you're done. All the damage and everything like that depends upon how well you succeed.
Wow.
So the play goes pretty fast. If you want to go in and do a flurry of blows and like strike at 3 different people, basically every action after the first action is a -5. So if you've got a good, like my character Rygar for his armed combat had a +15, and then plus his I think it was dexterity or something. He had another +4 because of his stat. So if I was going up against a bunch of mooks or, a bunch of low, piddly little things, then I could have done 3 attacks and had a greater than even chance of succeeding in all of them. I like the system. It plays well. It's very similar to the other systems that Capera puts out as well. So I recommend it. It's a fun game if you want to play in that sort of setting.
Very cool.
The last thing, which is a shared thing between you and I, is
yes.
the Zine of
really
Wondrous Power.
Right?
Right. So we have the Zine of Wondrous Power, High Moon Press. High Moon Press. Our friend Daniel Perez, we've known him. He's a former podcaster as well, and game designer. I backed the Kickstarter. I think you probably backed the Kickstarter since you have a physical copy as well.
I did.
I'm looking for. I just got these. I got them yesterday. I opened the package today, so I have yet to read them. I did read the first issue, so I have 2 copies of the first issue, and it was good. But it's basically it's a zine. It's a gaming zine about from his website of exploring, playing, design, creation, and discussion of role-playing games. It features short essays, small games, new rules, settings, fiction, and ideas. It's Daniel, so I know he produces some good stuff, so I wanted to pick it up. So looking forward to digging into that.
Yeah, and the current one is the Ion Codex, and so it's all about Ion Stones, and which I love. And Daniel talks about his love for Ion Stones, and I think this would be perfect for my weird fantasy science fiction lunchtime campaign that I'm running.
Oh yeah,
so who doesn't love a stone swirling around your head?
I mean, since it's fantasy science fiction, it could be either magic or some sort of super science.
Exactly. And they're gonna have fun figuring out which one it is.
Yeah. I remember when I first discovered Ion Stones way back, first edition at AD&D. I think they became a fixture in my game for probably 6 or 9 months. They were the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Daniel alludes to, like they're cool, but they're kind of weird, right? Like, you have this rock and it's magical and it gives you powers, but it's circling around your head.
Yes, it orbits around you, so it's a little weird. Yeah, you expect someone with a butterfly net to come up and just snag it. Yeah, so I have one other group topic sort of thing it didn't fit anywhere else that I'm labeling other geekery. I've been updating my Plex home library with a bunch of DVDs that I had had pulled out of storage and realized, I don't have these on my Plex anymore. So I've rewatched the first 2 seasons of Legend of Korra, because those were the ones that I have on DVD. And I watched the first couple episodes, and I think I'm actually gonna really watch the series, the episodes of the series that I have of Brimstone. I don't know if did you ever see Brimstone? You might have. It was kind of forgettable, which is probably why it was canceled, but it's got some really good ideas for gaming. And I was thinking about taking those ideas and pulling it into the werewolf game that I run, that we switch out. The idea is that there was a cop whose wife was raped. He tracks down the perpetrator and kills him and goes to hell shortly thereafter because he's killed later. Basically, there's a jailbreak in hell, and Lucifer has tapped the main character since he's really kind of a good guy, but he killed someone, and that's why he's in hell. So he sends him back to send back all of the demons, all of the people who had escaped from hell.
Is this an animated series or is it a live action?
This is a live action series.
This is ringing some bells for me, but they are distant bells.
The main character has like hundreds of tattoos all over his body. As he sends one of these people back to hell, the tattoo dissolves off of his body. It's interesting. It's pretty cool. I like the premise. It kind of comes to like a Friday the 13th, the series, or Warehouse 13. Who are we chasing after this week? It's a very Monster of the Week sort of thing. I should run just Monster of the Week and just have it be that. But I rediscovered it. I was going through the DVDs and I was like, oh yeah, this would be a good concept for, the werewolf game. I also rewatched Conan the Barbarian, definitely into the Conan vibe there. And then rewatched Thundar the Barbarian, which is the Saturday morning cartoon show.
So how was it? How was it, David?
I've watched like parts of a couple of episodes as I was moving through them.
Gotcha.
But I do intend to watch them fully. I remember them being quite cheesy in a couple spots. You know, I was really young when it came out, but I still has, especially since I'm running the Gamma World game, you know, Thundar and Gamma World they're just two peas in the same pod. And really want to kind of pull out the Thundar vibe in the Gamma World game. So I'm definitely going to be rewatching that series.
I love the idea of Thundar, but Thundar kind of falls into this class of things that I watched as a kid that I loved so much that I know if I go back and watch it, I'm not. Yeah. I may not love it as much.
It won't hold
the original
up.
Battlestar Galactica is the same, right? Like, yeah. I remember it. I have fuzzy golden memories of Battlestar Galactica. I know it's going to happen if I watch it again. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of B fantasy movies out there as well that just won't hold up quite as well either. I'm sure Conan certainly does to me. But like the Beastmaster, that probably won't hold up so well.
Probably not.
You know, so yeah, I'm probably going to be disappointed in some of the Thundar episodes because I mean, back then Saturday morning cartoons were not great either.
Right.
Like the best writing out there, you know, in retrospect was probably Scooby-Doo, you know, and it wasn't until like Thundercats and Transformers, and as they kept getting more and more sophisticated in their writing, not just we got to put an episode out this week, let's throw something together. There wasn't any coherent story or anything like that, or no cohesion at all. You know, so I that's what I expect out of Thundar, is no cohesion. So, but we'll see. And you might hear in the background Zeke, my dog. He has a Great Pyrenees. That is actually my last thing in other geekery. Is we have a new dog. We have Zoe. She's 2 months old. We just got her this last week as a companion for Zeke, and we're hoping as that playmate. He seemed to be very. We had hosted some friends of ours. We had their dogs for about a week and a half, and he seemed very lonely and to bark a whole lot more after they left. And so we think he's very lonely and wanted a playmate. And he's a Great Pyrenees. She's a Great Pyrenees, but maybe some Labrador in there.
Okay.
She's definitely not a pure breed, even though she was listed as Pyrenees. We weren't expecting papers or anything like that.
Gotcha.
She's pretty calm, little timid, but they're getting along really well now. They're sleeping next to each other, so they're like perfectly fine with each other now.
That's cool. That's a lot of dog.
That is a lot of dog. We will.
I think when they're fully grown, your 2 dogs will equal my 3 dogs.
Maybe, yeah. Zeke is, I think last, and this was a couple months back. Last we weighed him was at 76 pounds.
Oh, okay. I was thinking he was bigger than that.
He probably is bigger now. You know, Pyrenees can get up to like 110 pounds.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So he's only a year old. Supposedly they don't get to full size until they get to 2 years old. So yeah, he's got some growing to do. And yeah, Zoe is much smaller, but still bigger than both of our cats.
That's great. So for our next topic, I wanted to delve into a challenge I'm experiencing right now. I won't call it a problem because it really is a challenge. And I think anyone who's got a gaming group, whether it's been together for 20 years like mine, or if you just formed yesterday, it's coming to a consensus as to what you're going to play next. And so by way of background, my gaming group has been together for a long time. Most of that time, we've played some variation of Dungeons and Dragons. We've played through 3rd edition, 3.5, dabbled in a little bit of 4, and then we've been playing 5th edition pretty much solid since it came out. We also played Pathfinder, and we had a nice long run in Star Wars, but when it comes down to it, we're kind of very much D&D, D20, like that's been very much our wheelhouse over the years. And so we've dabbled in other systems. We've played some Savage Worlds.
I remember when you were playing Savage Worlds. Yep.
And I love me some Savage Worlds. I'll always bring it back around to Savage Worlds if I can. And we played a little bit of like some of the Cortex games. I think we played the Battlestar Galactica game. trying to think. So there's been kind of like a hodgepodge of things. A lot of times at game conventions, we have our little own homegrown game convention where we would get together and just play games for the whole weekend. And so that was our opportunity to try out different games. We played Deadlands and like either playing different genres or playing different games with rule sets we already knew, whatever. But now we find ourselves at this kind of pause point. I just ran a short Star Wars campaign, and me personally, I'm looking to branch out into other games. And so the question becomes, okay, how do we figure this out? And this is a challenge pre-COVID, during COVID. It'll be a challenge post-COVID. And so I thought this would be a good topic to go back and forth with, because I'm sure you've had this challenge before, and it's kind of like a nice like throwback to the old Game Master show.
Yep. Yeah.
So what approaches have you taken to this? What are your thoughts?
I mean, when we started the Saturday game stuff, I kind of ran into this as well of like, what do we want to play? And there are certain people in our group were like, I'm not really interested in that, and one of the things, like, we kind of adopted the idea of that we figured out in college, which was a lot of times when we want to go out to a restaurant or something like that, there would always be someone who's like, no, I don't want to go there. Well, we made a rule of, well, if you don't want to go there, you have to suggest something else. And if you can't suggest something else, we're going to the place that you don't want to go. And so there was that sort of similar sort of discussion, of like, do we want to play D&D? Do we want to play, and I wanted to play D&D. Not everybody in the group did. A couple of people, I had run a vampire game back in college, and several of the people in our group were in that game and were like, hey, I want to run vampire. And it's like, I'm not really in the headspace for vampire anymore. Not that, that sort of place. And so the suggestion was for werewolf. And I was like, I can probably do werewolf. And this was before the group got a little bit bigger. And one of the other guys was, and so some of the people in werewolf are not in that group. So this is why we play different games on the Sundays.
Gotcha.
So that group is D&D. Then there's werewolf. And then when almost nobody can show up, that's when we play Game World. How do you achieve a consensus? You're already past the, how do you discuss it, which is you just talk about it, that's that. And unfortunately, sometimes that just really needs to be said, because, not everybody thinks of, oh, we should just talk as a group about it, rather than someone coming in and saying, I'm running this. And then people are like, I don't really want to run that. And like, some people might ghost the group or do it, or worse, just begrudgingly do it and try and sabotage the game because that's not the game they really want to play. And even if they're doing it unconsciously, it's not good.
Right.
So talking about it is definitely the first thing. I've done polling. You've listed in our notes here that of like, what do you do with the polling? I don't know your group as well, but like, sometimes it's hard to get people to respond. If you're all in the same room, you can all talk about it and come to a consensus. But nowadays we can't do that. And so how do you do that? Like, how have you guys handled it so far?
So we've handled it a couple different ways over the years. And so, and polling, I think, worked best when we were doing, when it was doing for Newcom Con, that's our homegrown con. And so there's 20 games we could play. Everybody gets 5 votes. Whichever the top 5 vote getters of the games we're going to figure out how to schedule for the weekend, right?
Cool.
And so you could do that. You could say, okay, well, here's the big list of games, and everybody gets 5 votes, 3 votes, or whatever. The top vote getter is the one that we're going to play. The challenge with that, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, in necessarily a bad way, but you can get to kind of, it's the lowest common denominator across the entire group, and so. It may be that everyone is willing to play Dungeons and Dragons. I love D&D.
So everybody puts a vote there.
But everyone puts a vote there because they're willing to do it. And so then other things like, say, Savage Worlds or Call of Cthulhu or this cool new game that somebody's got on their shelf, but they've wanted to play for 20 years but never got off, and never actually was able to play that game. Like, that ends up getting less votes, right? Or not even getting any votes at all. And so I think the polling might actually help inform a conversation, but I don't know that it's a great deciding factor in this case because of that sort of, unless you say like whatever the top vote getter is, we're going to ignore.
So I think so. There's two things. Like your group was definitely incentivized to vote. You know, like they.
Oh yes, we did not have that problem. Everybody will participate.
You know, and sometimes it's a problem just like getting a response back on time, even for like when do you want to meet. You know, it's like sometimes that's hard to do if you don't have the incentive to vote as being an issue. You're talking about having a certain number of votes and then the highest number gets it. Reminded me of how like the UK or England like votes in some of the members of like, I think it's the House of Parliament, where everybody votes for their top candidate and they eliminate people. So it's not like whoever gets the highest vote. It's like, here, we're going to take X number of people, like 5 of the people running, and then you get to vote for like, here's my first choice, here's my second choice, here's my third choice. So your vote will always count. Unlike here in the States, where if you vote for a third-party candidate, that most of the time is throwing your vote away.
Right, because it's not like if your guy didn't win, like, yes, exactly. So,
but in the UK, in that system, your vote will always count. So you can vote for the third-party candidate. If they don't make it, then your second person or your third person, your vote will still go toward that. That might be an interesting thing to look up. You might get to a better result than, we're playing D&D again.
Right. And so I think part of it too is, and in this case, we're not even sure we don't know what system we want to play. We know what genre we want to play. We think we probably want to play science fiction. We don't know what kind of science fiction we want to play. So I could see polling taking on a role of basically seeding the larger conversation, right? This is the initial, like, okay, this is where we as a group, this is kind of where our collective headspace is. And then that helps with the conversation. And then the conversation, like right now we have basically 2 options. We have an ongoing forum that we've had for many years. It's a web-based forum. People could come in and post, and that's where I initially started this conversation, right? So I threw it out there, and this is where some of the initial ideas and brainstorming came in. But forum threads are hard. In the olden days when we had fewer kids and more free time, people would be on the forums all day and just like post all the time. And like, you could count on rapid response. But I think as we all know and have experienced on a daily basis at this point, communicating online can lose a lot of nuances, especially in forum posts, especially in Slack. That sly comment that in the real world, I know you were being a little bit sarcastic because there was a bit of a wink there. In the forum, it comes off as, well, just you're belligerent or you're being a jerk. Or I take it the worst possible way because I've been having a really crappy day, and I can't see you to understand the nuances of what you said, right? And also, I think the other challenge is it can be shifty. So not in a like, oh, you're being sneaky sort of way, but in a 3 people have a conversation, they're riffing on each other back and forth. The person who hasn't been on the forum for a couple of days comes in, they add some ideas, and maybe their ideas don't really necessarily gel with the thing that you talked about earlier. And then other people come in and they riff on those ideas. And so it can be very slow motion and kind of messy. I mean, I think this is always very messy unless it just automatically gels. I mean, that's happened, right? We've had other conversations where it's all obvious. We know what we want to play next.
Right.
But that doesn't always happen. And so in these cases, when you're kind of in this influx, is the hardest part to get the team to come together and figure out the team, like the group.
Yeah, the group. Yep.
But I think we've both been on teams in IT where you suffer from similar problems, like getting the team together, getting the group cohesion, getting through the storming part of forming that team and getting to the point where, okay, yeah, we're all actually in agreement.
Yep.
So I think where I'm leaning towards is the in-person brainstorming, which in this case would be probably video conferencing, because I don't think we're at a position where we'd be able to meet in the real world. And so then still not great because it's video, but at least it's in real time. Maybe encourage people to raise their hand if they want to talk or whatever, so we're not just all talking over one another because it's like 5 or 6 people. And between priming the pump with the polling and then the video conference, that might get us to where we need to be.
That'd be cool. Yeah, that's what we did for the Sunday game. when we started, we were like, we know that we won't always be here, so let's come up with a primary game. We also know that right now not everybody's here, so let's come up with a primary game for a group this size, and then we'll discuss it again, once we get the other people. And it was interesting. It was right at that cusp. We all met in person for that first part, but then the second part we had to all be separate. And so we basically jumped onto Discord, and we all talked video wise about the next set of stuff. I think the video conferencing will probably go a lot better than, a forum thread. I don't know that totally lost it. Sorry.
That's okay, man. It's been a long day.
Yeah, I think the video conference will go pretty well. The trick about the video conferences we've all discovered is, you don't always have the nuance of being in person. It's better than forum posting, but it's still talking over each other. The audio software and even if you have headphones, you can't decode that in an intelligible manner. Whereas if you're having 2 or 3 discussions in a living room, you can pick and choose which discussion you're listening to pretty easily. It might be too late once our audience hears this, but this is a perennial problem. This does not go away after the first time you pick it.
Yeah, and I think this will be something we can revisit in a later episode when we figure out what we do. And I mean, I have the benefit that we've all been together for a very long time. And so we also have the benefit, we have an alternative game that this is our alternate campaign. So we have one Sunday we're doing D&D, and then this is the alt game. Mm-hmm. And so we know that alt game is going to be D&D. So that kind of satisfies that particular niche, which I think frees us up to play in different genres and different games. The other thing that I floated with the group was, I think we've always benefited from trying these different games. And so, experiencing like me going out and playing Fate, or us as a group playtesting Battlestar Galactica when I was doing the review for Sci-Fi back in the day, when you have those games and you have those experiences, it changes the group a little bit. It opens up your mind. Like we talked about this before with Blades in the Dark, right? It just breaks you out of your mold. And then even if you don't end up playing, say, Star Trek on a weekly basis, there's usually some little thing that you take from that game and end up playing.
Yep.
Right. Yep. You incorporate it somehow into your campaign because you're like, that was cool. We should do that.
Right. I mean, all the games are really a codified playing as kids.
Right.
Pretending you're cops and robbers or whatever. Different people play differently, and different games bring out fun in different ways. It wasn't until, some of the story game stuff came out and Fate came out, or Spirit of the Century initially, and then Savage Worlds did several similar things. I don't know the history of when these things happened. They kind of all happened. They kind of all grabbed cool things from each other and knowingly and willingly did that. But I mean, that's why inspiration exists now in 5th edition, is because of some of those things. Even the more traditional games like D&D have benefited from other games. And so why can't we do that as players and GMs? Why don't we play other games every so often? Definitely read other games every so often and incorporate those into our favorite games, and hack on those favorite games so that we have the most amount of fun that we possibly can.
Right, exactly. And so I guess the other approach that I haven't taken, and actually I think way back in the archives of the Fear the Boot podcast, I know that they did several episodes over the years about the campaign template. And the idea here being having basically a worksheet as a way of kind of guiding the group through this conversation, because that's another option, right? Having a sort of, if your group can benefit from some structure, right, and you're just mm-hmm. stuck, having some sort of a campaign template, and there's any number of different, if people have suggestions, feel free to send them into us. But I know that's another option that I was into it a couple of years ago, but that's been a couple of years ago, so mm-hmm. I have not yet gone back out and seen what's there. But I know there's any number of products that are if your group needs help walking through this, it helps, right? Because it provides this template of, okay, well, what do you think about this, and what do you think about this?
So is that kind of like the concept of the social contract?
Yes.
I want this out of this game. I want that out of this game. Not necessarily please everybody, but to take as much of that input as possible to create the campaign or decide on the campaign that is being played.
And I think there were some recently. I trying to remember several companies that actually published this. I think Monte Cook Games had published one, but they were talking about basically safe gaming. I'm not probably using the right term, but the idea about how to have these guided conversations about what you're comfortable doing at the table. Yeah, because some role playing games can get very edgy. Yes, and not everybody's comfortable with that.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. There's one concept called the X card, where, and this is less about setting up the game, but while you're playing, and it's used in con games a lot, because some of those edgy games, you may be sitting down for edgy, but that edgy may go much further than you had wanted it to. So if the game starts to drift into that area of something that you don't want to touch, you can basically, reach out and touch that X card that's in the middle of the table, and no questions asked, they will steer that situation away from the thing that was upsetting you. If you've been a victim of sexual assault and the game starts to drift into that dark area, and you're like, I don't want to relive that. Thank you. That's one of those things that's kind of tangentially related to what we're talking about.
Right. And I think it all ties back into the campaign consensus, right? So it's really understanding what it is, if the group achieving that hive mind, if not quite hive mind, then at least agreement. What is it we're shooting for? So because otherwise the game will just fall apart in a couple sessions. Or the other thing that we've talked about in my group is that we are serial long-term gamers, right? So a lot of times we get into a headset of we're a mind space of this is the game and we're going to play it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't actually have to play it for a year. We could play it for 3 months.
Right. And, or just a session.
But again, if people came in thinking, wow, I love this idea, let's play this until the heat death of the universe, and other people are like, this was going to be a double shot, you're not on the same page.
Right. Yeah, that is something that should be asked. Yeah, the length of it, the tone of it. I should have, I made some assumptions. I think the whole group made some assumptions. The group before this last group, COVID really killed our meeting, but it was already kind of on the rocks because of other life stuff. We kind of didn't have a good game running. And part of the reasons we didn't actually talk about, what all of us want out of the game. So when we started the group, I started running, and I was like, I want to run a supers game, and I'm going to use the Mythic D6 system. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. It sounds like consensus, doesn't it?
Right.
But it's not, because a supers game can be so many different things. I wanted a Justice League, pretty old now, but the Justice League cartoon show, or the old Teen Titans, where it was, kind of serious. It was still supers, maybe a little comedy, not a problem. But there are other people who came in with the idea that we're more goofy superheroes, like Plastic Man or whatever. And then there were other people who came in who were more anti-heroes, who had superpowers but weren't necessarily good. And so we had 3 or 4 different tones in the same game, and it just didn't gel. And I think if we had talked about it before that game started, of this is the game I would like to run, are you okay with that? And if not, what do you guys want to run? What do you guys want me to run? What sort of tone are we looking for? How long is it going to be, etc. Having that discussion would have really helped. And unfortunately, we didn't learn our lesson. And, it's okay, well, no one's really having fun with the supers game. I'm not really having fun running it. So why don't we switch to another game? And, another person was like, well, I'll run Earth Dawn. And we're like, yeah, we'd never really played Earth Dawn before. What's it like? And he kind of gave us an example. And I think everybody kind of went into it thinking, oh, this is going to be just kind of D&D. But that's not what Earth Dawn is. And so we still had some people who were like, pretty serious, some people who were kind of goofy. We didn't have that consensus still.
Right.
That there, I think, is the real cause for why that group kind of dissolved. We're still friends, but we just don't game right now. I think if we do have that if we do talk about gaming again, I'm gonna insist on that conversation, because if we try to game again and we don't have that conversation, we're gonna end up with the same result.
Right. Exactly.
People not having the fun that they want to have.
Yeah, and so that's part of our other conversation that we're going to need to have is once we even settle on our genre within science fiction, we've got cyberpunk, space opera, near future, high SF. We've thrown in like an urban fantasy option, which you could mash up with cyberpunk to get Shadowrun. So and even within those, there's so much. And so I think part of our conversation needs to be, okay, we're doing space opera. Well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean Star Trek? Do you mean The Expanse? Because those are two very different approaches to space opera, right? Are you talking more with the hard SF edge? And then do you mean tell me the series.
Or do you mean Flash Gordon or Star Wars? Both of those are considered space opera too. Star Wars and Flash Gordon, very different than The Expanse. I wouldn't have personally, I wouldn't have even I would not have classified The Expanse as a space opera. I would have classified that as more hard sci-fi.
Yeah, it's definitely closer to hard SF. And so I think, it's got some aspects of that because you're starting to go out into the larger galaxy, right? You've got wormhole travel, not to debate the definitions of space opera, but truly, like if I'm coming in and I'm like, well, actually what I've gotten, but what I said space opera, but what I mean is The Expanse. We just illustrated our problem.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
What are you talking about? There's laser guns. I want rail guns. Right?
Yeah.
Like you can't have high energy particle weapons. Are you kidding me? That's impossible. Okay. Well, you may not be talking about space opera.
Right. And then of course there's like Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica. Sci-fi is huge.
And even Battlestar Galactica. Do you mean new Battlestar Galactica? Do you mean Battlestar Galactica? Because those are two very different approaches to space opera, right? Like,
I mean, I think right now you need to like basically go, okay, what movies do you want to play?
Right.
Because I as gamers, and I'm sure, you and your friends have watched a bunch of movies, TV shows, etc. It's like, what media can you liken it to that we all kind of you figure out what language you need to speak, and if you can speak in the language of media to get that across, that will probably help.
Right. And I think Star Wars, when you run Star Wars, you run Star Trek, the setting is already taken care of. These questions have answered. And there's nuances within that. Are you doing Mandalorian? Are you going, the Clone Wars? Or like what approach are you taking? But a lot of the questions are answered because you've answered the overarching question. The style is Star Wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's an area where we're going to need to think through it. And I like the idea of using media as a palette. Like I'm going to pull from these different things. If you haven't read it, that gives you a little time to go out and do some homework. I think this is the challenge we ran into with Numenera back in the day when we play tested that. We had run a couple of different sessions, and I personally, as the DM and as a player, was struggling with. It's a billion years in the future. There have been 9 civilizations that have risen and fallen. You're living in the final civilization at the end of time. You could go so many different ways there. And it was kind of like the paradox choice, like the choice of the paradox of choice. You have so many different options. You can't choose anything. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think being able to build up that conversation using media to help inform this. Oh, well, I was thinking more like Thundar.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Great. Now I can recalibrate Numenera to the style of game that we want to play.
Yeah. So, even when you say I want to be in the Aliens universe, well, the movies there have very different tones as well. Be sure to narrow it down.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's what we're going to do. I think we got a lot of stuff going on right now. Our group is experiencing the same summertime challenges that I think many gaming groups, like you mentioned with yours.
Yep.
People are still going on responsible vacations, right? So everybody's doing things in a safe way, but still, one way or another, you might want to be outside with your family. You might want to be doing things, especially after being cooped up all spring.
Yep.
So I think that's a challenge. And usually we get back into the swing of things in September. The kids go back to school. Extracurricular activities fall into their familiar groove, and then you can kind of get back into your regular headspace. And And so I expect, my hope would be that we can have the conversation in August, and then hopefully that'll set us up for September. So, if there's maybe there's a little bit of homework, people go and watch some movies, especially if we're doing a homegrown thing. I think there's definitely an itch that several of us have where we're enjoying building things. And so that's another trait to identify, right? Because if people aren't interested in building things, then you don't want to lose those people as part of the group.
Right. Yeah, like that's a big part of like the Dresden Files role-playing game, where you build the city that you're going to play in. And
I think our group has usually traditionally hit a nice balance with those things. The people who get super excited in building out the world, so they do that. And it's usually a really cool collaborative exercise where we've had things called post-fests, which I think we stole from the old Greytalk listserv, where, you'd say, here is this little known area of Greyhawk. Let's build it out. Right? You start a thread, and do we all just kind of build on that thread? And so that's the thing that I think we're missing, that a number of us would like to get back into. So yeah, it's a challenging thing. We'd love to hear people's comments and thoughts on the challenges that you've experienced with achieving consensus within your gaming group. As you said, David, it is a problem we will have, a challenge we will have.
Yes,
for all time, and it can be very fun, but it can, done wrong, it can also cause a lot of strife. So opinions are welcome.
Different groups deal with it differently. Some groups just know, and some groups, especially groups that are just coming together, you have to have a lot more discussion, because you don't have that back history to, everyone doesn't have that back history to kind of lean on and go, yeah, if he's saying Star Wars, I know what he means, so. Yeah.
And there are some groups for whom the DM is God. I mean, like this is the DM's responsibility, or this is the game master's responsibility. I am here to play. I am not interested in world building, and so you tell me what game it is we're playing, I will be there.
Yep.
Right. I think the challenge is that even then, though, I think there are always unstated expectations.
Yeah, and that sounds like another topic as well. Is like, is the GM the one that should be doing all that? They can certainly. But should they? How much of that load should be put on the GM's shoulders? Or how much of that, I hesitate to call it power, but that's the only word that's coming up. How much of that power should the GM have over the entire group?
Right. Yeah.
Something we could talk about in the future.
Sounds like an excellent topic.
If you want to give us feedback, if you want to give us your own stories, that's what I'm trying to get across here. I love talking with Ken. Partly why we're doing this is to, talk with each other, but we also want to talk with you out there. You've subscribed, so obviously know how to get to our website. I would hope we'll put it in the show notes as well, but it is lairofsecrets.com. Give us some comments, let us know, and we will talk with you again soon.